Hello, sixth graders, and welcome to 5.2 here. And today we'll be discussing how to add and subtract fractions that have unlike denominators. So denominators that are not the same. And we're going to build from last lesson of least common multiple and kind of show you how that works with adding and subtracting fractions. Okay. To start off, for our vocab today, we have least common denominator, and that's actually very similar to the least common multiple, like we had talked about last section. And that's the least, let's see if my pen's out here. There we go. The least common multiple of two or more denominators. So really the way that we found our least common multiple last section will be very similar, and now we'll just apply that to fractions so we can add and subtract fractions that have different denominators. Okay, and in example 1, it says Mark made pizza with pepperoni covering a quarter of the pizza and onions covering another third. What fraction of the pizza is covered by pepperoni or onions? All right, so what we need to do is take the space that pepperoni covers and onion covers and add them together. Well, you'll notice that we've got fractions that have different denominators. And that's tricky because we cannot add two different fractions that have unlike denominators. We need to get them to where they have a common denominator. So we're going to find a common denominator for 4 and 3. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to write equivalent fractions with something as the common denominator. All right, well, I've got 4 and I've got 3. What is the least common denominator that they have in common? Well, I could just find the least common multiple of 4 and 3. So multiples of 4 would be 4, 8, 12, 16, and so on. 3 would be 3, 6, 9, 12, and you'll notice 12 is the least common that they have. So we're going to write 12 with 12 as a common denominator. So we're going to get fourths into twelfths, and we're also going to get thirds into twelfths, and that'll be a whole lot easier to add. So how do I go from fourths to twelfths? Well, I multiply by 3. So I need to multiply my numerator by 3. And 1 times 3 would give me 3 twelfths. And 3 times 4 would give me 12. And 1 times 4 would give me 4. So I come up with 1/4 is equivalent to 3 twelfths. And 1/3 is equivalent to 4 twelfths. So now I just need to add the numerators and keep the common denominator. So twelfths would be my common denominator, and 4 plus 3, 3 plus 4 would be 7. Right? If you look here, this represents a quarter of space, and this represents a third. And then each one of these would be 12ths. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 twelfths. And notice that for a quarter, there are 3 twelfths, the same as what I got here. 1/4 represents the same amount as 3 twelfths. And here, 1/3 represents the same as 1, 2, 3, 4 twelfths. So the pepperoni or onions cover 7 twelfths of the pizza. In other words, a little bit more than half. All right, flip to the next page for our next example. And we've got a couple different methods to apply for example 2. and see how that goes. It says add or subtract, write each answer in simplest form. Okay, so this is the first method, and this is without using the least common denominator right away. It just wants us to multiply our denominators. Okay, so the denominators would be 10 and 8, which would give me 80. Okay, and then I would write 7/10 as 80ths and 3/8 as 80ths. Okay, so write equivalent fractions. So 80ths for both of these. To go from tenths to 80ths, I multiply by 8. So my numerator, 7 times 8 would give me 56. Again, here to here, I multiplied by 8. So here to here, I need to multiply by 8. Same for the second fraction. To go from 8 to 80, I multiplied by 10. So do the same to the top. 3 times 10 would be 30. So now I have 56 80ths minus 30 80ths, keeping the same denominator of 80. 56 minus 30 gives me 26. And in my last step, now I need to write it in simplest form. Okay, what do 26 and 80 have in common? Well, you'll notice they're both even numbers because they end in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8. So I could divide these each by 2 to simplify them. I'm just looking for a common factor that they have. 26 divided by 2 would be 13, and 80 divided by 2 would be 40. And do 13 and 40 have any common factors? Not besides 1, so that would be the answer in simplest form, 13/40. Okay. In the next problem, it wants me to use the least common denominator to solve. So I've got 11/12 minus 3/8. If I have 12 and 8, what is the least common multiple between these two? Well, 12, 24, 36, 48, and 8. 16, 24. Oh, perfect. It's right away here. It's 24. So I could write each of these fractions with a denominator of 24. Okay, so write equivalent fractions. So I need to get 11/12 into 24ths. So I had to multiply by 2 on top, gives me 22 24ths. And on the second fraction, I have 3/8, and I need to get that into 24ths. So I have times by 3 there. Multiplying by 3 on top gives me 9 24ths. So keep my common denominator of 24, and 22 minus 9 would give me 13. So I end up with 13 24ths. You'll notice here now, I don't have to put it in simplest form because it already is in simplest form, and the reason is because I used the least common denominator. If you use least common multiple and least common denominator in your first step, then you don't have to simplify in the end because it will already be in simplest form. Lastly, for method number 3, we're going to use a little bit of mental math. So I have 5/16 plus 1/8. And I'm going to think that, okay, well, 16 is a multiple of 8. So the least common denominator is going to be 16. Because I could easily get 8ths into 16ths by just doubling it. Again, multiplying by 2. So rewrite 8ths with a denominator of 16. Well, I just did that. I just doubled it. That'd be 2/16. And then add. Okay, my denominator, keep the same denominator, and 5 plus 2 is 7. Right? So when when one is a multiple of another, it's usually pretty quick and easy. That's nice. And lastly, flip to letter D here, and it's really similar to the one we just did. But again, think that we've got another example where it's a multiple, and it's actually the same numbers. So 5/16 minus 1/8. Excuse me. Again, 16 is a multiple of 8, so it's got to be 16 for our least common denominator. If I were to rewrite this into 16ths, just times it by 2. So it would be the same as 5/16 minus 2/16, which would give me a total of 3/16. Okay. Why don't you go ahead and pause the last example here, or the last check it out section. Try them on your own and see what you come up with. All right. It said Tori made pizza with peppers covering a third and ham covering another half. What fraction is covered by peppers and ham? Well, if I take 1/3 plus 1/2, that'll tell me. But first I need to get a common denominator. So I'm going to find the least common. So I'm going to find the least common multiple of these two. Well, that's going to be 6. So I'm going to rewrite both of these in terms of 6. 1/3 to get to 6, I would just times by 2. So multiplying my top by 2 would give me 2/6 plus a half as 6. Well, what is half of 6? That'd be 3. 2 to 6, you need to multiply by 3. 1 times 3 on top would give you 3. So keep your same denominator of 6, and 2 plus 3 is 5. And lastly, if I'm looking at 8/10 minus 2/6, what is a common denominator here? Well, let's see. If I had 6 and I had 10, what are my multiples? 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. Looks like it's going to be the first one. That will work. So I've got, I'm going to get these both into 30ths. So 8/10 into 30ths times by 3 times our top by 3 is 24. And if I were to get 2/6 into 30ths, multiply by 5 would be 10. So I've got 24 30ths minus 10 30ths. 24 minus 10 would be 14 30ths. And we're not as simple as we could be because both of these are even. You can divide them both by 2. 14 divided by 2 would give me 7, and 30 divided by 2 would give me 15. So don't forget about simplest form. Check and see if they have any common factors that you could divide out. All right, that wraps up the second section here for adding and subtracting with unlike denominators. Let me know if you have more questions, and I'll be happy to help. Wouldn't be a bad idea if you're still a little bit not too confident with this section. It's a little bit tricky for you. Check out those tutorial videos on your My HRW. Okay, those are very helpful. You can always add those to this note sheet. That's all I've got for you this time, 6th grade. Until next time, I'll see you later.